started. Thank you so much, everyone. My name is Dr. Shana Weiss. I am the Associate Director here of the Schusterman Center for Israel Studies at Brandeis University. I am thrilled to welcome you all to our workshop as part of our launch for our very first art exhibit, the Zionist Phantom. I am also so lucky that we are part of the Leonard Bernstein Festival of the Arts. Please check out their other programming this week as well, and we thank them for their support and helping us put this together. I am going to introduce Dana and Rotem, who you will meet briefly, and pass it along to them. I want to say personally that I'm really excited that we're doing something sort of more hands-on and thoughtful and responsive. It's a bit different than the programs we usually run at Schusterman, but I think they're just as important and even more so, allowing us to learn and think about Israel, about photography, about memory, in all sorts of different ways. Before I introduce Dana and Rotem, I also want to thank everyone who worked really hard today to make things happen. And that includes, of course, the incredible Anna Simpson, our communications director, Karen Goodblatt, Risa Singer, Wendy Simpson, and Jonathan Sarna as well. So I'm going to introduce Dana and Rotem, and then I will pass it along for them for the workshop. If you have questions at any time or comments, you can put them into the chat. There's also a live transcript available that you can turn on or off using the sort of CC button you see at the bottom of your screen. So, Dana Arieli is a professor of history and photography based in Jerusalem. She is an associate professor at the design faculty in the Holon Institute of Technology in Israel. She received a PhD from Hebrew University in 1996. Her work focuses on the interrelationship between art and politics and totalitarian and democratic systems. She studied photography at many places, including Camera Obscura, Bezalel, which is the Academy of Arts and Designs in Jerusalem. Her work has been shown all over the world, and I am very excited that it is making a virtual stop at Brandeis before it goes to other exciting places like Venice. And I'm excited to hear about that. Our curator today is Dr. Rotem Rosenthal. She is also the chief curator and senior director of arts and culture at the American Jewish University. She is a photo historian, a scholar, consultant, lecturer, and mother, and in all sorts of ways. She also knows tons about Israeli popular culture. I really enjoyed meeting and working with her in this. Her writing has appeared in multiple forums, including artforum.com, Tablet, Philosophy of Photography, Tohu Magazine, Alexon. She has been recognized and supported by multiple organizations, including Artistes, the Independent Curators International, and the Center for Jewish History. So again, thank you all so much for joining us. I am going to pass it over to Rotem and Dana. Dana, please get us started. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Shana, for this brilliant and beautiful introduction. I'm really happy to be here today. Yesterday, we had a rather crowded opening, so it's gorgeous to see, first of all, the faces and to be able to communicate in person. It feels as it should. I mean, not as it should, because this is a Zoom time, but still, at least I see all of you, and I want to congratulate you on your locations. I'm speaking to you from Jerusalem, and I assume some of you probably visited. Maybe we'll have some time later when we do the second part of my presentation to hear about your experience with Israel and so on. So I would like to start by thanking the center for this wonderful opportunity, first of all, to exhibit the Zionist Phantom, and then, of course, to meet Rotem. It was a wonderful time for me. I mean, we haven't actually met yet in person, but definitely after this exhibition, we will do that. And this opportunity to talk about the Zionist Phantom is really important for me, because I think it can shed some light on the complex reality in which I live. You've probably heard that in the last few days, Jerusalem has been lit on fire again, as it's normally does. And I think some of the complexities will be joining us through my presentation today. Shana, you said before that Rotem is doing a lot of things, and you mentioned the fact that she's a mother on top of all the other things she's doing. Well, the same is true for me. And I must tell you that as we speak now, you know, that just the sheer fact that I know that my son is taking a train through the area of Mount Scopius is enough to keep me alarmed. And my son is bigger. So it's of course about being a mother, not just being a citizen in the city, but also being a researcher and a photographer here in Israel. And this all makes up a rather complex reality that I would like to share with you. I would like to dedicate our conversation today to the Phantoms project, and with your permission, I would move now into showing you some images and explain to you a bit about this project, which evolved. It started more than 10 years ago, so it's about a decade of a very intense work, which is coming now to a sort of a junction, a very interesting junction in my eyes. So let me start by sharing the screen with you and tell me if you all see what I'm showing. Cool, lovely. So obviously this is me and this is the name of our exhibition. And I would like to start, of course I will explain in a while exactly what do I mean by the terms Zionist Phantom and why do I use the term Phantom and so on. But before I'll do that, let me please start with a short introduction about myself. And I think the best way to start is here. I don't think it would come as a surprise to any of you that the year 1984 indicates here the establishment of the State of Israel. And of course, this is immediately after World War II, and as part of what I would say is the wave of the new democracies, like India, who is going through a very difficult times nowadays. But this is an issue that I would like to go back to later. The other date indicates the day that I was born, the year that I was born, 1963. And I must tell you that at that point in time, there was no indication in my childhood to the fact that this is a new country. I wasn't aware to the fact that we're going through the process of nation building. And this is a very complex issue, especially in terms of culture. How does one build a state? As a child, none of it, I wasn't aware to any of it. It all skipped my mind. And I felt really secure as this place ever always existed. And it wasn't a new state. I didn't know that some of the people that I met in the street had numbers on their arms. I had no idea about their forced exile from places they were born in. I had no idea about the pain they experienced as they were forced to leave their families. Nor did I knew anything about the people who were deported from their own houses here in Jerusalem, close to me, in the places that are just, you know, surrounding me. People that used to be the old settlers of this Holy Land that got new settlers back in 1948. So this is the introduction and the beginning. And here you can see me at the age of 7 on a way to a very, very important journey. This is, of course, taking in the old airport in Jerusalem. And obviously, this is me on the left side, not on the right side. But this was my first major trip out of Israel. We were on the way to Africa. Actually, we were on the way to Gabon. And this amazing country in the center of Africa that was celebrating at that point in time 10 years of independence was really unique. You know, when I landed there, everything seems different to me. And I think it was there that I developed my voluptuousness for photos. I believe my father was on a diplomatic mission. It was supposed to last for about 5 years, but it didn't, because my mom got sick and she was hospitalized. But on the meanwhile, on the right side, you can see my best friend. I was teaching all of them Hebrew. for some reason, the one word that I really remember that I was teaching them was Hebrew for tomato, or agvania. Okay, so this is one of my recollections of Africa, which I really want to go back to one day. Let me see. Of course, I'll skip. I'm not going to do it long, but here you can see on my left side, Saba, which is my grandfather, and on the right side, Safta, my grandmother, and he's smiling. As opposed to my grandmother, he's smiling, but there was, of course, a huge cloud hanging over his sky. And I will tell you a bit about this cloud in a moment. For myself, I just joined the army. I was given a permission to join my grandfather on his day of celebration. He was given the highest award at that time. It was called Yakir Yerushalayim, sort of a decoration given to the people who helped shaping the city, both, I would say, socially and morally. And of course, I had no clue that this is the last time that I'm going to see him. I was a new recruit at the IDF, obligatory service for 2 years. And just a couple of weeks went by, and we were sent as very young soldiers to evacuate Yamit. This is, of course, a Jewish settlement in South Sinai, and Yamit was built after Israel won Yom Kippur War in 1973. And certainly one of the most traumatic events in the history of Israel, especially in light of the euphoria of 1967, there was a big clash there. Because the territories of Yamit, or the territories that Yamit was built on before, were of course part of Egypt. And after the peace treaty with the Egyptians was signed back in 1978, it was returned to Egypt. And there's so many disturbing remains in Israel. And I assume that probably the first disturbing remains that I saw was throughout this process of evacuation that I was witnessing as a very young soldier. And it also carried a trauma, because on the left side, you can see a photo of my best friend, Ayelet. She was standing right next to me when we had to evacuate babies, to separate them from their own mothers who chose to stay in their houses in Yamit against the instructions of the army. So this was a really troubling moment. At the end of this horrible day to begin with, this is April 26, 1982. So basically yesterday when we opened, I celebrated 39 years to that day. But at the end of this horrible date, my grandfather passed away. And they say that they didn't have rain in Jerusalem in April for a long time, but he was reading Shai Agnon. He closed his eyes and he said goodbye to the world, while I was on my way back to Sarafan, to the army base in the center of Israel, where I was serving. And if I had the chance, to sort of overcome it, and it was really tough for me because he was a close friend of mine, again, a few more weeks passed by and the first Lebanon war, which is about to celebrate 40 years now, started. So this was my own generation war. And of course, every generation with his story and with his war. But I think definitely Yom Kippur, I will tell you a bit more later about. So here is my founding image. A founding image is something that I learned to study when I was, when I was studying photography back in Bezalel. Altogether throughout my life, I think I lived maybe 6 or 7 years out of Israel, normally in Europe. And as I told you, after my mom got sick in Africa, we were moved to Paris and we were located there for a couple of years. And during my army service years, my parents were again in Europe. Because I was considered what they call in Israel a lonely soldier, I was given the opportunity to visit them every year for a month. And here I was, after the first Lebanon war in 1982, I was allowed to travel to visit them for the first time. And as if there were not enough wars going on in my life, we decided to visit for the first time in my life a concentration camp. Now, we are back in 1984. I was officer in the army, and I remember very, very vividly that the night before, me and my father, we tried to find a sign that would lead us to Dachau on the map. But however we tried, it was not there. Very different, of course, than today, but the next day, the receptionist of the Tourist Information Center looked at me as if I'm crazy, as if a place like that never existed. And it was really difficult to find it. But at the end of the day, when we did, I was really shocked to find this note attached to a wooden gate with a sellotape, written in 4 languages. In 4 languages. At that point in time, I could only read the second line. The concentration camp is closed today. I would maybe come back to my associations at that point, but it took me a lot of time to understand how important this image was for me. Over the next 20 years, I was working at the Hebrew University, then I moved to Tel Aviv University. My PhD, as Shana mentioned before, was devoted to Nazi leaders and their conceptions regarding arts. As the years went by, I became, so to say, an expert on the interrelations between art and politics in both democracies and totalitarian systems. But it was only after the assassination of Yitzhak Rabin in 1985 that I felt a deep need to change my field of study. And then I gradually moved into studying the interrelations between art and politics in Israel. And it went through a dramatic change after he was shot. Everything was changed for me. It was not only the peace with the Arabs that died at that moment. I believe it was the ending point for the Israeli left, and it might serve as an explanation to the processes we're going through now in the Israeli society. But this was probably why I decided to dedicate the future years to his assassination, and I wrote 2 books. One of them won the Prime Minister Award for the year 2006. A few years went by, and in 2004, I was appointed head of the History and Theory in Bezalel, Academy of Art and Design. And this appointment came at a really crucial time for me, because I just lost my father, to him I was deeply attached, and also my husband, whom I love deeply, but preferred another one. So it became like a very sad novella. And as I mentioned, I felt a need for a change all this time. And this is why I decided to start studying photography again in 2009. This was a very, very unique point in time. On the one hand, I was head of a department, a professor with a faculty card. At the other hand, I was a student. And when I went to study photography, they didn't know nothing about me. They had no clue that I can ask my permission to delay the seminar, that they can do, they can delay the stuff that they don't want to do in Bezalel. It lasted for 1 year. The second year, they already knew, so I lost my advantage, but it was really unique. And I think that, you know, going back to photography was really a decisive moment, because ever since I can remember myself, I was taking photos. To be more precise, ever since my dad gave me his serious first camera and allowed me to take photos. And this is why this particular image is so important for me, because not only it's probably my first photo, it's also the photo of him, you know. Years went by, and I think the project would start in a way back in 2005, although formally I started taking phantoms in 2009. But when I moved from the university to Bezalel, I was asked to guide a tour at Yad Vashem. The Institute just opened its new wing. The year is now 2005. And the museum was open to the crowd after renovation. And I went there. I just went there in order to search some materials and to come across things that might, you know, help me to facilitate this visit. When to my utter astonishment, I came across my grandmother's testimony page. I was visiting in Yad Vashem, the Chamber of Names, devoted to the 7 million names of the Jews that are being collected ever since this project started. And the names of the people that were massacred in the concentration camp. And I was shocked to discover not only his handwriting, but the whole family tree. It was so easy to access. Now, I had no clue that his family history will arise from the 13 pages of testimony he filled back in 1956. He was telling me everything. Who was his mother? What was her nickname? Who was his sister? How many children did she have? They were all murdered on the eve of Sukkot in 1941 in Nadburna. Still, it wasn't until 2018 when I was asked to give a lecture in Kyoto in Japan about the Phantoms project that I finally started connecting all the dots. I was asked to tell my personal story. And as I was celebrating with myself, I was debating with myself how to tell the story of his family, of my grandfather's family. I decided to search for a book that I remember that was published in 1975 in Jerusalem. This was a book that was devoted to this disappearing Jewish community of Nadburna in Poland, which is now, of course, part of the Ukraine. And as I found it, I was shocked again to understand that there were other pages of testimony, this time those that my grandmother wrote. And there was a picture there. It looked familiar. You know, they say that trauma is lost in the oblivion until one day it comes back to you. So at the beginning, I wasn't sure why I knew this guy's face. There are here marked on a red square. I wasn't sure. But then I remembered this picture was hanged in my grandmother's bedroom and she went to sleep every night next to it. It was hanged over her head. This was her family. This was her brother. I asked my mother, who is it? And she said, Yaakov Handelsman, your grandmother's brother. As I was browsing through the book, I saw the dedication, this dedication in the first page. There was his picture again. And in both Hebrew and Yiddish, they wrote that the authors wish to thank Yaakov Handelsman for his photos. Included in the memory book. Was he a photographer? So am I a descendant of another photographer? Does this mean that if my mother's uncle was alive, if she was to have a normal childhood with grandmother and grandfather like I did, maybe he would be the one to give me a camera, my first camera to use. This was the point that I realized for the first time in my life that this is my family, not his family. I look at the photos in the book again and again. By now, I had the original copy that belonged to my grandmother. I think I remember that I was maybe 11 or 12 when she received the book and she gave me her permission to write her explanations and even to use a pencil. And there's a circle that I did surrounding both their faces before they left to Israel in 1934. There's also my handwriting in pencil in the words Saba and Safta, because she wanted me to understand exactly what's going on. This was her first instruction for me for a Phantom's journey I didn't dare to do so far. In the pages of the book, I could read, turn left in this corner, you will see my primary school. Go left here, you will see my house. I never did that yet. I discovered Yaakov Handelsman's signature there. I am now trying to understand how, if he was murdered in 1941, how did his photos arrive to Israel and stood at the heart of this memory book? In a split of a second, I realized why I do what I do, why I moved from research to photography, why am I documenting relics, why do I find so much interest in history, relics, remains, objects? You see, my grandmother, she was a dressmaker. She collected buttons. Her brother was a photographer. This is one explanation to my lifetime mission, a camera button. There are some points of departures or beginning to the Phantoms project. In 2009, I traveled for what was expected to be a single journey to Germany. It lasted a month. But as soon as I came back to Israel, or maybe even before, when I met my son in Munich and showed him some of the materials I gathered, I knew I'm going to travel again. I was so thrilled that my biggest critic of all times, but also my most serious and wise critic, my son, told me he likes it. You can do it. 11 years went by and I traveled all over Europe in search of relics of totalitarian systems. 33 journeys, 33 journeys. Everything that I studied and researched was now useful in my self-therapy based on photography research. In recent years, my journeys included also the Far East. My last exhibition in Frankfurt just before COVID-19 was devoted to trees that survived the atomic bombs, Fat Man and Little Boy. I will show you some materials soon. I would like to move briefly now into my last book, The Zionist Phantom, that was published just a few days ago. This is the cover, and this is basically the third book in the trilogy that I devoted to the phantoms. The first was the Nazi Phantom that was published so far, basically mostly in Hebrew, but of course extracts from it were translated in 2014 by Wrestling Press in Tel Aviv. The second book in this trilogy was Phantoms, Journey Following the Relics of Dictatorship. This was already a participatory project like the one I'm doing now. And the book had about 127 or 29 comments of various people around the world. And the last one, The Zionist Phantom, which came out a few days ago, includes about 185 comments, and they are written in various languages. People who write in English, the publication includes English, and if they write in Arabic, then of course it stays in Arabic, but most of the readers are writers write in Hebrew. And here is a really interesting process, because if on the first Phantoms project, the international project, the ones that deal with the relics of totalitarian systems, I approached people then using CD-ROM or disc on key, you know, and asking them to just, you know, browse and look and choose one single image. And I remember very vividly that the deadline was May 1st, 2016. And me and my son, you know, we were making jokes all the time that if I'll get 120 comments, I'll probably live till the year 120. But I wasn't sure, you know, because the days before I had maybe 15, 20 comments. So it got to be scary. But on May 1st, to my utter astonishment, there were about 140 comments. And I said, wow, what am I going to do with this? You know, so many people wrote. I said, I must publish a book. So I published a book in 2016, and I had a very big solo here in Israel, and then it traveled really all around the world, but there was no site. And the reactions came on again and again and again. And then I said, okay, I need to design a site. Let's do a site and, you know, just ask people to write. So today there are roughly about 800 comments, and it's really touching. You know, every time a new language comes in. When I was in Japan, I got my first comment in Japanese. This was really thrilling. With the Zionist Phantom, I went the other way around. I first designed the site, and then the book came out. And so it's alive still now. And in a moment, I will explain to you exactly how do I see it. But just to explain how it works, when you enter the site, it doesn't matter which one of them, but we'll be looking today at the Zionist Phantom site, and you have the address in the chat. So when we go into the site and you choose a category, whatever category you prefer, you can see that some of the images are already marked in red. These images are images that have comments, and if you look carefully, you will see that in some cases there are different numbers. You know, some images get 6, 7, 2 comments, it changes. But what you do basically is you look at the image, you click on it. This was my reminder that I still have about 5 minutes to end. and to pass it on to you guys. So in any case, when you click on the image, it becomes bigger. And underneath it, there's an option for you to write a comment. It's really fascinating. You know, for instance, in Berlin, there are many locations that I'm coming back to again and again. And here you can see the issue of the Ausländers or the refugees. Places like Tempelhof, a building, a relic, a phantom that was designed by the Nazis as an aviation center, is now serving refugees from Syria. So there are amazing ironies of life when you come across, when you visit places like that again and again. And it's really interesting to come back. And as I mentioned, after I did many journeys to Germany and to Italy and to France and to the former USSR and to Poland and to Greek and to really, really interesting places in the world, I decided to go to East Asia. And over there, it took me many years to do this journey. And over there, I stayed in Nagasaki and Hiroshima, quite a long time. And I took photos of the relics there. And again, I was really interested in learning that in Japan, this whole process, you know, of taking care of the plants, which is really important, includes also trees that survive the atomic bombs. And it's really shocking, you know, to see that some of those trees are getting treated nowadays. So it might be over 70 years after World War II and after the atomic bombs, and still the trees are getting treated. So you can probably understand why, for me, it was really touching to have my first comment in this section in Arabic. It was really telling, you know, and really important, because this is the point in which you do not know the people who are making comments. And it becomes really sort of international also in terms of the languages. Let me conclude by an example to a comment, which was by now translated into 7 languages, because it was exhibited with me. So this is not just an invitation for you to write a comment, it's also an invitation to be part of my exhibitions in the future, because this is how I do it. I may be the one who is taking the photos, but you are the one who are making the interpretation. And my concept is that your comments are part of my exhibition. And I would like to conclude with a text that every time that I read is really touching me. You can see that it belonged to the section with the headers KZ, which is of course from German, the Konzentrationslagen, KZnik, to those of you who know the history of Yechiel Dinur, the poet who changed his name after he gave his testimony in the trial back in 1961. And I'm pointing to the image that the text is referring to. This is the image. It's an image that I call Coming to Terms with the Past. I took it in Auschwitz back in 2015. And this is from the series KZ. Let me read it to you. To pity, to envy, to regret, to rejoice, to pity. My mother was not with her mother in Auschwitz. It's not that my mother wasn't in Auschwitz. In fact, she was in Auschwitz, as well as in other 8 concentration camps. But her mother wasn't with her in Auschwitz. She was sent to Sobibor. Needless to say, she did not get out of there to join her grandmother and to pay a visit to Auschwitz or anywhere else. To envy. My mother was not with me in Auschwitz. She got out of there and surgically removed the number on her hand. She smiled to the world, and whenever she was asked about the past, she told only the good, of what was in Amsterdam before and after the war, when she returned and found out she was alone. She hated discussing the Holocaust, hated hearing about Auschwitz or talking about it. To regret. I cannot tell my children my mother's story from Auschwitz. I don't know it. I have never heard it. The stories were erased together with the number. I suppose the memories were not erased. In fact, since her death, as the years go by, I'm certain that they are not erased. They just died with her to rejoice. I was not with my mother, with my daughter in Auschwitz. She was there with her friends and her teachers. I did not go with her because I cannot. But when I go with her to other places to tell other stories, and when we stand thus facing a drawing in a museum, my mother, who taught me so much about art and about joy, is there with us. This, what I believe, amazing text, but let me tell you, I have more than 1,000 texts like that. So that makes me a very proud person to be able to share with you my work, but also get your writings. This is exactly what motivated me to do the Zionist Phantom project and to look at Israel, of course, in a different manner. And this is why I devoted a separate site. It's really important for me to tell you, very straightforward, that Israel is not a totalitarian system, and of course it has its difficulties. But I'm a great fan of this society. This is probably why I live here in Jerusalem. But I still wanted, to show all the relics, all that remains, and to talk about this memory culture. And this is what I do here in this project. So the concept stays exactly the same. You just click on one of the images, it becomes red, you enlarge it, and then you choose the part that you want to write on. Just browse a bit. What we were thinking about, Rotem and I, if it's okay, is that you guys will look at the site. You have the address with you, and you take about 20, maybe 25 minutes to browse, to choose an image. And please, 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 when we're back, what we would like to do is to ask you to share with us what you wrote. It's really important to us, even if it's going to be a very, very short text, even if it's something that you would like to maybe fix afterwards, it's not a problem. I'll leave you with my email address, and you can, of course, look at it afterwards and write it more thoroughly if there's a need to do that. But once you come back to us as a group, we would be delighted to have your comments, and therefore hear your stories, your memories, your recollections of the places you're looking at as part of the Zionist Phantom. So I think at that point, I will say thank you very much for listening. And please, if there's any need for further explanation, I'm here.
I mean, tough act to follow, right? But we're going to do our best. We would like to welcome everyone back to this shared space. We hope you enjoyed the music. We hope you enjoyed your time with photographs. I know that I tremendously enjoyed my time with the music and my time with the photographs. So hello again, my name is Rotem, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity to be with everyone today. And now what we would like to do is we would like to share a little bit of what you were writing while we were off camera. I know you guys were all dancing, but really, we want to share the writing. So I will start us off, and then I will invite you all to share your work as well. You can turn on your camera if you would like, and we can all be together as we share this work. So I'm just going to quickly share my screen so you can see what I was thinking about. And I'm going to start with this image. And I'm going to read you a brief text. Please look at the image while I read. Gray, cloudy skies are framed by geometric forms made of concrete. A cylinder connected to an oval by a rounded surface. Another rectangle meets another rounded surface. There are markings in the rhythm of the concrete. Textures, lines, change in tones. Perhaps it's wet. Another image is occupied by concrete, flattening our point of view. Names of locations appear in Hebrew. Te'elim, Chatzerim, Chalutza, Urim. Dotted lines have been carved, marking borders, a map embedded in stone. These close-ups offer partial views of Israel's famous monument to the Negev Brigade, designed by Dani Caravan. This site commemorates the fallen Palmach warriors who fought Arab forces in 1948 during the devastating war that followed Israel's declaration of independence. Sprawling in the desert, the monument asks to underscore local history and continually recover it, eternalizing both a particular form of memory and itself as the embodiment of this memory. Although a caption tells us we're situated at the monument, it is unrecognizable in these images. At the same time, it seems eerily familiar. We remain trapped between the brutalist geometric shapes that define or block our view. So that's my contribution to this ongoing effort. And we're so excited to hear your contributions as well as Dana's project continues to expand and grow. And its next stop is actually going to be at the Venice Biennial, which is very, very exciting. So now I would like to invite someone else to read, and I think I will start by inviting Shana.
Thank you so much. And before I start, I think what makes sense if people want to share, and maybe if they just type something in the chat, that way we know, and then we can sort of call on you. And then we'll of course invite you to share.
Yeah, you can also raise your hands if you prefer.
Right, you could also raise your hands using the raise your hand.
Invite you.
And one of us will know. Right, so I am also going to share my screen. Actually, I'm just going to put a link in the comments. So I think that might be easier. Okay, so this is the photo that I chose. And if you click on it, you can see it's it's an emptied pool, an emptied swimming space. And I wrote, I study bodies of water and their politics. I wrote my dissertation on fights about mixed and separate swimming in Israel and pools and beaches. One of my advisors was Michael Feige, an anthropologist and historian at Ben-Gurion University. In 2016, he died in a terrorist attack at the Sarona market. I cannot say enough about how kind he was and how much he helped me. When I think of his loss, I think of this pool, an empty space, longing to be filled, waiting forever for a presence. I also think about the drained pools in my homeland in the American South, where whites drain pools and close them off to the public, instead of integrating them and opening them to Black Americans. That's what I decided to share and write. These sort of two images and memories I have of both my research and my own personal history. And I would say, especially for Professor Feige, who passed away in this attack, he actually studied the conflict and sort of the peace movement and the settler movement. And I don't think he would have loved maybe the official commemoration, or maybe he would have thought it would be funny. Probably would have thought it would be funny. So I wanted to choose something. I was thinking about him in terms of stories that I felt was more apt of his personality. And I know he loved pools like I did. So that's why I chose it.
You know, Shana, first of all, I wish to thank you so much for your comment. So touching. Of course, I knew him also. And he wrote a couple of things about Rabin assassination as well. So this was really devastating, you know, to finally come across a person who did in research many things that I was interested in, you know, and then, and he also wrote about terror. And then at the end of the day, to die in such a traumatic way, this was a really sad story. We all commemorate.
I think what is so beautiful about Shana's comment and Dana, your response as well, is that is at the gist of this project. Those meeting points between the landscape and the personal experience, between the collective trauma and the personal loss, I think is one of the threads that really defines this project in its entirety. And I think also that's part of the reason why I was so drawn to the monuments and the way you capture them, because the perspective that you bring into this project really disconnects them from how they want to be monuments of memory and really change our perspective of them. And Shana, thank you so much for this beautiful, beautiful comment. I hope that you can all now see in the chat. Shana put a link to the image, and I also shared my screen to make sure that you all can see the image. I wonder if anyone else also wants to share. You can jump in. This is a safe space to share. We're all trained in the uncomfortable silences, right? As all of us as lecturers, especially in the Zoom universe, the uncomfortable silences as people join up.
Let's give it a moment.
Yeah, we'll give it a moment, and then we'll move on. And if anyone just wants to share the image and their comment in the chat, and that we will read them, that is, of course, also a possibility. We'll be delighted to share our screens as well. And I think as people are getting settled in, Dana, if there's a comment from the project that you would like for us to share with everyone, we can also read those out as well.
I think that if it's okay, maybe Anna can share the short video with the three comments that I really love. That could be a great idea.
Sounds great.
So this was completed just a couple of days before for the Venice Biennale.
The Zionist Phantom, a personal lexicon by Dana Arieli. Beginning. In 2009, I began photographing phantoms. I embarked on a journey tracing the relics of Nazism in Germany, without intending to follow fragments of history again in Germany or in any other place in the world. It took me a long time to understand that my photos of the phantoms in Europe have their parallels in Israel, and that in essence, I'm searching for the same things, transverting different continents and areas.
השביל המחבר בין יד ושם והר הרצל עובר בתל סאקי.
Phantom. The French word phantom means ghost or illusionistic vision. Psychologists use the term phantom pain to depict the physical pain amputees experience arising from their body and psyche. When I visit battlefield, I can almost feel the phantom pains of the wounded.
הקרון בדרך לאישם, מי בפנים, מי יודע. בסוף כולם שם נראו אותו הדבר. גברים, נשים, ילדים וזקנים כבר לא היו. הקרון בדרך לאושוויץ. היה שם אדמו"ר, פעם חיו שם יהודים, ואז באו הגרמנים, מחקו הכל. הקימו בית חרושת למוות. היו כמה שנשארו בחיים. אבא שלי, אבא של חברה, אבא של חבר, אמא של חברה, כמה מהם עדיין בחיים. יכולים לספר לנו מה היה שם. מי יכול להאמין? באמת לא יאמן. יש להם מספר 68715. היה המספר של אבא. עברו כמעט 30 שנה מאז ראיתי את המספר על היד, ואני עדיין זוכרת. מבוך התעלות של גבעת התחמושת היה מגרש המשחקים של ילדותי. מאז שאני זוכר את עצמי, התרוצצתי שם, מפעיל את הדמיון ומשחק מחבואים. אני מנסה להבין מה התרחש שם במשך 4.5 שעות באותו לילה נורא ביוני 67. את האבא הכל כך פרטי ואישי שלי איבדתי שם. הוא היה שלי ושל אמא, לפני שהוא וחבריו החיים והמתים הפכו לנחלת הכלל, לסיפור אגדה ומיתוס ניצחון בלתי נתפס. הרצון לדעת אותו את סיפור חייו הכולל ובתוכו את בחירותיו והחלטותיו בדרך אל מותו הפך למשימת חיי. עשיתי זאת בעזרת חבריו לנשק ובעזרת אמא, מונע מכוח סקרנות אין קץ של ילד, לימים נער, חייל, מפקד ואב בעצמי.
Dana, thank you so much for bringing this video and for sharing this with us. We should note that this video was created in the framework of the Venice Biennial, which is the next stop of this project. And it is already there now, along with the box that you could see in the video of all the postcards and all the comments that were made by people around the world, really. So, you know, Dana, you've mentioned a little bit the incredible international reach of this project. I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about what you hope will come next. How do you envision the Zionist Phantom continuing its growth and development?
First of all, as we started, and I said that I wish to thank both of you, Shana and Rotem, and of course, Jonathan, and this ability to introduce such a project to the US, which is, you know, my first encounter with exhibit spaces that are not in Europe. This is a very unique, you know, point in time for this project, and I really, really wish it to be exhibited in.
Hey, Dana, you're muted.
Sorry, is it better now? I mean,
yes, maybe just restate your last sentence.
So I'm saying that this is my first encounter with audience in the United States, and it's really important point because I think it's really different than in Europe, and this whole process of translating the Israeli culture and what happens here in this tiny land, which causes so much difficulties and makes so much noise, you know, is something that is not clear to me. You know, it's I'm still yet to learn how will people receive it in other places. What does it mean? Can it function as a sort of a, you know, diplomatic bridge to explain the uniqueness of this particular place, its difficulties, its history, its memory, culture? So these are all questions that are hanging. So on the one hand, I really wish to see it thriving and going through other locations.
Yeah.
But on the other side, to be completely honest with you, for me, it's about taking photos. So the one thing that makes me really happy is the ability to, you know, to introduce it and then get somebody to write me, have you been to this deserted pool in Hefziba at the north of Israel? Because this is the most awesome place. You must go there. And like, you know, I'm like a ghostbuster. I mean, I'll probably be there within a day or two. So yeah,
that's great.
That's nice. Yeah, that's the nice part.
I see that Shlomit raised her hand. Shlomit, would you like to share your comment with us? Shlomit?
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, perfect, thank you. So Shlomit, and then I see that Tamar has also raised her hand. So Shlomit, and then we'll go to Tamar.
I am very impressed with the project. I love the one in the desert. It's really incredible. It's very powerful. But there is something else I could relate to when you said you traced back, you went to Germany and so on. I was born in Hungary. I went through the Holocaust. And I went to Israel to try to find my father, who never came back from the concentration camp. And I thought I might find him because he wanted to go to Palestine in 1939. And my mother didn't want to go. She didn't want to leave her comfort. And when I was in Tel Aviv, I was in Kibbutz Chatzor. And when I went to Tel Aviv, and the bus stopped, I always looked to see if my father is one of them, one of the people that tried to get on the bus. So it really meant a lot to me, what you were just saying, tracing back, going to, to Germany, to the concentration camp and so on.
Well,
So for me, it is very, and about Israel too. You see, I'm in America because I went through the Holocaust and the Second World War. And after the 1956 war, the Sinai campaign, we couldn't stay there. We had to go to a safe place because I couldn't stand the constant threat.
mhm.
But Israel, I don't speak Hungarian, but I came from Hungary, but when I don't know a word in English, it will come in Hebrew and vice versa. And Israel has a very, very important part in my life. And I'm always fighting. But at the Temple 21, we have to support Israel. We need it because I remember when I came to Israel as a survivor, I came with Youth Aliyah. And when I saw this strong Israeli guy, suntanned and tall and straight, looking into the world, I said, this is it. This is what I want.
Mm.
So that's my story.
Thank you, Shlomit. Thank you so much for those comments and for being a part of our discussion today. Tamar, you also had a
Yes.
comment.
Thank you. I wanted to first say that the exhibit is amazing. I'm so fascinated by the whole concept of memory culture and all of the ways that in various locations that you have focused on this and made it come alive for people who really don't necessarily know that much about, a particular period in history. I didn't have time to look through as many images as I wanted to, and I would certainly like to spend some more time with them, but I was looking in the IDF section. I think it was in collections. I'm not sure which, but you're using mannequins to represent soldiers, and I wondered if you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, of course. Well, mannequins is always fascinating, especially when you go to the IDF collection. And I think the last thing you expect to find is a doll of a soldier. It's like these contradictions and they always appear. And so after a while, I understood that mannequins served basically during the 40s and the 50s to show us the right type, the right type of the soldier, the right type of the nurse, and they were basically spread all over. Whenever you travel, like you'll find them.
So this is actually in the museum, correct?
This one, yes.
Okay.
There are many others, like for instance, there's one in the section which is devoted to disturbing remains in the north of Israel, in Naharaim. There's a bus, an old bus by the Israeli company of Eged, which is the one responsible for transportation. And there is this pair who are going to work, and the guy is holding a book, and his wife, probably a nurse somewhere, is sitting next to him. And this is probably done back in the 50s. And of course, by now, the book is completely out of usage and the pages are ruined. And you enter into this old bus and you see this scenery, and this is not a museum. It's just out there in the open space. So yes, it motivates me. And they are there. Also in the section of Yad Mordechai Museum, you can see the first lady soldiers dressed, or ladies from the kibbutzim, So it was a very programmatic moment in the history of Zionism back in the 40s. And of course, today it does not exist. I mean, you might see a hologram, but you won't see a mannequin, you know? So there's a big difference by now.
Right. Thank you.
I see that David also has a comment. David, you raised your hand.
Sure.
Hi, how are you? Dana, this is beautiful. Thank you for inviting me to this.
Good to see you.
It's beautiful to see you finally after all these years.
I think it's over 20 by now, right?
I don't want to think about it. I don't want to think about it.
I love it that there's an added layer of drama to this workshop with a long life encounter.
It was, I think, my first international conference in London. And if I can recall, it was somewhere around, it was before Rabin assassination for sure. So it's over 20 years since we met.
All right, good enough. I'll take your word for it. Listen, I wanted you to, you know, the pictures and the stories and the relationship between photography and memory are very compelling. But tell us about, were there times when you said, it's something that struck me. You said that you love taking pictures. Were there times when you were not allowed, or where you were told that you weren't, you couldn't take pictures? And can you talk about that?
Well, listen, I was arrested at least 4 times, and it was really interesting. You know, the occasions were really different than one another. But I must admit that the first time I was encountered with the fact that you cannot take photos was at home, was in Jerusalem. And this was for me really devastating, because the occasion was not at all pointing my camera into something of a secrecy. It was just trying to understand how this how this camera is operating, because at that point, it was back in 2009, I didn't have my own camera. So I borrowed a camera from Bezalel in order to get ready for this journey that I told you about in 2009. And as soon as I was looking at, I always look at, Rotem, you described that very, very good when you say a rectangle and then a square, and then it always, my frames always start with a shape, with a form. So I was standing, next to the Givat Ram campus, which later became a place that I visited again and again. And I was just looking at the interrelations between a round circle and a square, both from beton, like a very brutalist architecture, when all of a sudden somebody came back to me and he says, well, you cannot take photos here. And I said, why? He says, you're pointing your camera to the Prime Minister ministry. I said, okay, so, because I'm from here and I felt really secure. The next times were not so neat and nice, because I was in Moscow. And this time I was pointing my camera to the former KGB headquarters, but the former head KGB. And all of a sudden, a hidden policeman, said, listen, lady, I want to have your camera with everything in it, because you're not allowed to take photos here. Now, it wasn't before the Iron Curtain fell. It was many, many years afterwards. So I was like stunned, and of course it happened again. It happened many times. I was arrested once even in Tempelhof in Berlin. And this is something that, every time you come to visit such place, of course you need to get a permission first. It's not that I walk in, you don't walk into a Nazi bunker. Somebody needs to know you're there just in case, I don't know, an earthquake arrives, and then nobody would ever know that I'm there, because whenever I take photos, I'm normally by myself. So people know, and it's really frustrating to have everything organized before and then get arrested. So this time it was really a mess. It happens, but it doesn't happen a lot. And, it's a risk that comes with the territory. Normally it's okay. I mean, normally it's okay. It's complicated to have people opening up places that are normally shut to the regular visitor. And today, after many, many, many years, I'm already aware to the fact that it might happen. But Yeah, but it's not so common. It's not so common.
I'm still at you can't just walk into a Nazi bunker. I'm just trying to imagine that. Dana, piggybacking off of David's question and in a sense also Tamal's question, what surprised you the most in all the years that you've been following the Phantoms?
I think the difference between various societies. I think I was struck, when I went to Hiroshima, and everything in the city is looking at what they call the hypocenter. The hypocenter is the place where the bomb was dropped, and they just mark the distances between the hypocenter and the rest of the world, because this may tell you if there's any chance for you to discover houses that were really brought there, because the first 2 kilometers from the hypocenter, almost nothing is left. And when you get to this cradle of darkness, to this really scary place, and you look at it, they will tell you that this is a museum for peace. They will never talk about the atomic bomb. They will never talk about the atrocities of World War II. They will never explain to you about the experience they had back during those days. They only talk about peace. And this is, this is really interesting, because it makes you understand that there's a difference in the point of view. And also, in various societies, like I'm also stunned by the way the Germans are looking into their historical, story straight in the eyes. They're not afraid. And this is something I really envy, because there are many forms of commemoration in Germany. Sometimes it's much too much, there's an overburden of commemoration. But at the end of the day, you cannot stay indifferent to that. This is something that's really amazing to look how each single city has its own mechanism of commemoration. And of course there are differences, and I would never compare what you see in Berlin, which is much more open to its past, than, for instance, Munich. But they manage to do it in a way that doesn't make you feel like, for instance, when you visit a concentration camp in Poland, and I believe many of you had this experience or know about this experience, it doesn't make you feel that it's an industry. It doesn't make you feel if somebody is inviting you to see these atrocities, but then at the end of the day also pay, and like it's a business, it's a show business, like Eddie Wiesel used to say. They managed to do it in a very delicate way. And of course, which line do you cross, and how do you manage to deal with substances that are so complicated, is a matter of mentality. It's not an easy path to take, it's not.
But what I was really struck by, and I think your project does beautifully, is how, you talk about the differences between different societies, but I think that what we're experiencing through this project, and I was thinking about that as you were presenting earlier, is the poignancy and the strength of the personal story. How the personal perspective that is so always invariably different than the way the site is being seen by someone else is so powerful, and how even the idea of the personal experience is what connects all these different sites, and in the way that they're shown within your project.
Yes, I think it all started back in 2015. I was working then at an exhibition in Israel, which was taken after the name of the poet, Paul Celan, and his very famous poema called Black Milk, in which he described the differences between the Nazis and the Jews back in the 30s. It's a very powerful poema. And I was looking at an image by Anselm Kiefer, which probably some of you may know. He's a German artist, and I was really interested in the way in which Anselm Kiefer decided to give sight to this poema. And I decided it would be a very good idea to ask different people to write about the same image. And it was ever since that moment, that occurred to me that really everybody would read an image differently. And here is an option, for me to share my photos with people who would certainly add a knowledge that it's so profound for me, because I do not know the stories, the exact details of the places that I'm visiting. I can tell if this is a place where an accident happened, a war happened, if there was an atrocity. Of course, I know that. But I would never be able to give testimony like we heard from Shlomit a few minutes ago.
Yeah.
And this is for me so touching, to be able to have a single photo, managing to have people share with us their own private story. I think this is a lifetime mission, for me. The fact that soon we're not going to be having the ability to hear direct testimonies is so scary. I grew up in a place in which every single Holocaust Memorial Day we would have in school people giving testimonies. I'm certain, Rotem, that you had, and I don't know if Israel is also in the crowd, but sitting in front of us, and you can actually ask them questions and touch them, and of course our grandmothers and grandfathers and so on. And this is not going to last. And the big question is, what is going to replace it? What are we going to have instead of these amazing testimonies, unbelievable testimonies, as Judy Baum is saying in her section, who can believe about the wagon in Yad Vashem? She managed to capture it so well. And there's no way that my voice could depict that. You need this polyphony of voices. Absolutely. In order to really understand the whole story of this really complex society, with all its
all of its mixed nuances that your project really crystallizes in such a powerful way. So I want to thank you, Dana, for sharing all of this with us today. And I would like to thank everyone who joined us and for becoming active participants in this exhibition that we're so very proud and honored to be able to share with you. And I would like to hand it over to Shana Weiss.
Again, I just want to echo my thanks, and of course add my thanks to our amazing curator, Rotem, our artist, Dana. I encourage you to check out the exhibit and all our other programming on social media, and have a lovely day. Thank you all so much for coming.